The war room was silent except for the soft humming of the display screens. Commander Zephyx stood at the center of the circular chamber, his crystalline body reflecting the dim blue lights. Around him sat the members of the Galactic Council, representatives from 40 different species across known space. Every single one of them looked tired and afraid. The holographic display showed the latest battle reports. Another star system had fallen to the Vraxian swarm. 3 billion lives lost in less than a week. The insectoid aliens were unstoppable, consuming everything in their path, like a plague of locusts, made of metal and rage. Zephyx had been fighting this war for 12 cycles now. He had watched friends die, seen entire planets turn to ash, and witnessed the slow collapse of civilizations that had stood for thousands of years. The Council forces were brave and well-trained, but they were losing. Every battle cost them more ships than they could replace. Every retreat gave the Vraxians more territory to spread across. Ambassador Kellera stood up from her seat. She was a Meridian, a peaceful species known for their diplomatic skills rather than their warrior culture. Her soft purple skin seemed to glow slightly in the dim light as she spoke. Her voice was quiet but clear. "We have one option left," she said. "There is a species we discovered 6 months ago on the outer rim of the galaxy. They come from a world that our survey team classified as a Class 12 death world." Several council members made sounds of shock and concern. Death worlds were rare and dangerous. A Class 12 rating meant the planet was barely habitable, filled with threats that would kill most known species within hours. "You cannot be serious," General Thoraxis growled. He was a massive being, standing nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armor-like skin. "Deathworlders are violent and unpredictable. We cannot trust such creatures." Number 4. Number 4. Kilara looked at him with sad eyes. "We are out of options. The Vraxians will reach the core worlds in 2 cycles. Our children will die. Our homes will burn. These humans, as they call themselves, might be our only hope." The debate went on for hours. Some argued that bringing in Deathworlders was too dangerous. Others pointed out that the Vraxians were already at their doorstep. In the end, the vote was close. But the decision was made. They would send a message to Earth and ask for help. The transmission traveled through space at faster than light speeds, carrying a plea for assistance from a civilization humanity had never known existed. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the alarm went off. It was 3 in the morning aboard the ship Valiant, and he had been reviewing supply reports for the past 4 hours. His brown hair was messy, and his uniform jacket hung on the back of his chair. At 42 years old, Jake had spent half his life in space, first as a pilot and now as a ship captain. The communications officer, Lieutenant Sam Parker, turned to him with wide eyes. "Sir, you need to see this. We are receiving a transmission on frequencies we have never used before. It is not from any human source." Jake stood up quickly, his tiredness forgotten. "Put it on screen." The image that appeared was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The being speaking was crystalline, its body made of what looked like living glass. The translation software worked surprisingly well, turning the alien sounds into clear English. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council. We represent the civilized species of this galaxy. We are facing extinction at the hands of an enemy called the Vraxian Swarm. We have fought for 12 cycles, and we are losing. We have studied your species and your world. You come from a planet more dangerous than most, and you have survived against odds that would destroy other races. We are asking for your help. Please, if you can hear this message, respond. We are desperate." The message ended, and the bridge was completely silent. Jake stared at the screen, his mind racing. Aliens. A galactic war. A request for military assistance. It sounded like something from a science fiction movie, but the data was real. The transmission included coordinates, tactical information, and evidence of battles fought across distant stars. Within 6 hours, Jake had forwarded the message up the chain of command. Within 12 hours, every government on Earth knew about it. Within 24 hours, the world was in chaos, as people tried to understand what this meant for humanity's future. Admiral Helen Crawford was chosen to lead humanity's response. She was 58 years old. With gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen combat in the Mars conflict 20 years earlier, she stood before the United Earth Council and gave her assessment in simple, direct terms. The transmission is genuine. The war is real. The Galactic Council is losing. And they need help. We have a choice. We can stay here and hope the war never reaches us. Or we can go out there and make first contact on our terms, as allies, rather than victims. The debate was fierce. But in the end, the decision was made. Earth would send a military task force to assist the Galactic Council. 20 warships would make the journey, carrying humanity's best soldiers, pilots, and scientists. Jake found himself in command of the Valiant, one of the flagships of the fleet. His crew consisted of 140 men and women, all volunteers who understood they might never come home. Among them was Lieutenant Ben Carter, a veteran soldier with kind eyes and a reputation for keeping his team alive in impossible situations. There was also Sergeant Lisa Hayes, a tactical expert who could read a battlefield better than anyone Jake had ever met. Dr. Amy Chen joined the fleet as their chief scientist. She was 35 years old, brilliant, and had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life. Now she would get to meet them face to face. The jump through faster-than-light space took 3 days. When the human fleet emerged at the rendezvous coordinates, they found themselves in the middle of hell. 3 alien ships were burning in space, their shields flickering under constant attack from hundreds of small craft. The attacking ships were unlike anything in human databases. They looked organic, almost alive, with surfaces that seemed to pulse and move. These were the Vraxian drones, and they were tearing the Council ships apart. Jake did not hesitate. All ships, weapons free, target those drones. Fire at will. The Valiant's railguns came online, massive weapons that used magnetic acceleration to fire dense metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The other human ships followed suit, and suddenly space was filled with streaks of light as thousands of rounds tore through the Vraxian formation. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Vraxian drones had shields designed to absorb energy weapons, but they were not prepared for solid projectiles moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Drone after drone exploded into fragments as the human barrage continued. Within 8 minutes, the battle was over. The Vraxian force was destroyed, reduced to floating debris. The 3 Council ships, damaged but intact, sent urgent messages of thanks and confusion to the human fleet. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Vrel of the Council Defense Force. You saved our lives. Please identify yourselves, came the transmission. Jake responded, This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth ship Valiant. We received your call for help. We are here to assist in your war against the Vraxians. There was a long pause. Finally, Vrel responded, his voice filled with emotion that the translator conveyed clearly. You are the humans, the Deathworlders. We did not expect you so soon. Please follow us to Outpost Sanctuary. The Council is waiting to meet you. The human fleet followed the damaged Council ships to a massive space station orbiting a blue planet. The station was beautiful, built with elegant curves and artistic designs that showed these aliens valued beauty as much as function. It was also clearly a military installation, with weapons, platforms, and shield generators visible across its surface. When Jake and Admiral Crawford stepped off their shuttle and into the station, they got their first real look at the Galactic Council species. There were dozens of different types of aliens, from the crystalline Altarians to the massive Thoraxians. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others on 4 or 6 or more. Some had eyes humans could recognize. Others had sensory organs that defied easy description. Commander Zephyx approached them, his crystalline body catching the light in beautiful patterns. He was accompanied by Ambassador Kellera and several other senior council officials. They studied the humans with obvious curiosity and some fear. Helen Crawford stepped forward and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Zephyx looked at the hand uncertainly before reaching out with one of his own appendages. The handshake was awkward, but meaningful. On behalf of humanity, we offer our assistance in your war, Helen said. Show us your enemy, and we will help you defeat them. The council led the human delegation to a strategic planning room. For hours, they shared information about the war. The humans learned about the Vraxian swarm, how they consumed worlds, and turned everything into more drones. The council explained their tactics, their losses, their desperate situation. Lisa Hayes sat quietly through most of the briefing, studying the tactical displays and battle records. The more she saw, the more troubled she became. Finally, she could not stay silent any longer. "Excuse me," she said, interrupting a council general who was explaining their defensive protocols. "I have reviewed your battle tactics, and I need to ask a question. Why do you always retreat? In the last 50 engagements, you have withdrawn from every single battle, even the ones you were winning." The council officials looked at each other uncomfortably. General Thoraxis spoke, his deep voice rumbling through the translator. "We have protocols. When casualties reach 15%, we must withdraw to preserve our forces. When civilians are at risk, evacuation takes priority over tactical advantage. We have rules that must be followed." Lisa looked at him with barely concealed frustration. "Your rules are losing you the war. You are fighting not to lose, instead of fighting to win. Every time you retreat, you give the Vraxians more space to spread. Every time you prioritize evacuation over destroying their forces, you let them regroup and attack again." The room went silent. Several council members looked offended, but Zephyx leaned forward, his crystalline form shifting slightly. "What would you do differently?" "Not." Ben Carter spoke up from where he stood near the back of the room. "We would take the fight to them, find their bases, and destroy them. Cut their supply lines. Make them react to us instead of always reacting to them. Accept that war has costs, and focus on ending it as quickly as possible." Ambassador Kellera shook her head slowly. "We cannot simply abandon our principles. We are not barbarians. The cost in lives would be terrible." Jake had been quiet until now, but he finally spoke. "The cost in lives is already terrible. Your way has resulted in billions of deaths over 12 cycles. Maybe it is time to try something different." Number 2. The debate continued for hours, but no agreement was reached. Finally, a compromise was suggested. The humans would be given a small sector to defend, using their own methods. If they succeeded, the council would consider changing their broader strategy. The first test came quickly. A research station on a planet called Kellis 4 was about to be overrun by Vraxian forces. Standard council procedure was to send scout ships, assess the situation, and organize a careful evacuation over several days. Jake looked at the timeline and made a different call. The Valiant and 3 other human ships would jump directly to the station, establish a defensive perimeter, and evacuate everyone immediately using combat drop ships. Total time required would be less than 1 hour. The council observers were horrified. It was too risky, too fast, too aggressive. But the humans did not wait for approval. They simply went. Ben led the ground team down to the station. His Marines moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, gathering researchers and support staff. When Vraxian scouts arrived earlier than expected, the humans did not fall back. They held their position and fought with a controlled aggression that shocked the watching aliens. Every single person on the station was evacuated. There were Z-news of the human victories, spread through the council forces like fire through dry grass. The Deathworlders were winning battles that should have been impossible. More importantly, they made it look easy. 3 weeks after arriving, Admiral Crawford was called to appear before the Council High Command. She brought Jake, Ben, and Lisa with her. What they presented that day would change the entire war. Lisa stood before the holographic display showing dozens of battle maps. She had spent every spare moment analyzing Council tactics, and her findings were not kind. She spoke clearly and directly, not trying to soften her words. "You are losing because you fight scared," she said. "Every decision you make is about minimizing risk instead of maximizing victory. You let the Vraxians choose where and when to fight. You react instead of act. You treat every soldier's life as irreplaceable instead of understanding that sometimes sacrifice is necessary to save more lives later." General Thoraxis stood up, his massive form towering over the humans. His voice was angry. "My people have been fighting wars for 10,000 years. What can you possibly teach us? You come from a single world, barely reaching the stars. We have defended civilizations across the galaxy." Jake stepped forward and activated the tactical display. "Then let us show you what we would do differently." For the next 2 hours, the humans demonstrated their approach to warfare. They showed aggressive flanking maneuvers that caught enemies by surprise. They explained the concept of acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic victory. They demonstrated how destroying command structures was more effective than endlessly fighting drones. They showed how speed and aggression could overcome superior numbers. It went against everything the Council believed. Their culture valued life above all else. They saw war as a terrible necessity, something to be endured with minimal damage. The human approach seemed brutal and cold. Helen Crawford addressed the Council with quiet authority. "We understand your hesitation. Our history is filled with terrible wars, mistakes we can never undo. But we learned something from all that bloodshed. Sometimes the fastest way to peace is through victory. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is end a war quickly, even if it means higher casualties in the short term." The debate lasted for hours. Some council members were horrified by human methods. Others pointed out that their current approach was failing. Finally, a compromise was reached. The humans would be given command of the 7th Fleet, a battle group that had been nearly destroyed in recent fighting. They would have full authority to operate as they saw fit in their assigned sector. If they succeeded, the Council would consider broader changes. Ben found himself promoted to Major and given command of a new unit called the 1st Combined Combat Force. His team consisted of 30 human Marines and 70 Council soldiers from various species. The culture clash was immediate and intense. The alien soldiers were professional and brave, but they fought according to strict rules. Every decision required approval from multiple officers. Every risk needed to be evaluated by committee. Every casualty was treated as a potential war crime that might end someone's career. Ben had to teach them a different way. He showed them that sometimes the only path forward was through danger. That hesitation killed more soldiers than boldness. That war was terrible. But losing was worse. Their first mission together was to retake a mining colony on a planet called Vesper 7. The Vraxians had built a forward base there. Standard Council tactics would involve a siege lasting months, slowly starving the enemy of supplies. Ben had a different plan. His team would land secretly, move through enemy territory to find the Vraxian command center, and destroy it from within. The mission would take less than a day. Several alien soldiers requested transfers. They thought the plan was suicide. But Ben led by example. He was the first one out of the dropship. The first one into danger. His calmness under fire, his confidence in chaotic situations, slowly won over the skeptical aliens. The alien soldiers watched how humans moved through hostile terrain. They saw how Ben's team communicated with just hand signals and brief words. They witnessed the controlled aggression of a human combat unit, the way they flowed around obstacles like water, always moving forward. The mission succeeded. The Vraxian base fell in just 6 hours. Casualties were light. When they returned to base, not a single alien soldier requested transfer. Instead, They asked for more training from human instructors. Meanwhile, Jake was taking the reformed 7th Fleet on a campaign that would become legendary in Council military history. Instead of defending fixed positions and waiting for attacks, they went hunting. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable than Council vessels. Jake used this advantage to locate Vraxian supply convoys and destroy them. His fleet found staging areas where the Vraxians gathered forces and hit them hard before they could organize attacks. For the first time in 12 cycles, the Vraxians were on the defensive. They had to worry about protecting their own territory instead of just attacking. The psychology of the war was shifting. Dr. Amy Chen was making her own contributions. Working in the Council science facilities, she studied captured Vraxian specimens. What she discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. The Vraxians were not mindless insects as many believed. They were intelligent and organized, controlled by a hive mind that coordinated their actions across vast distances. But Amy found their weakness. The hive communication relied on bioelectric signals that could be disrupted. She designed a weapon that would sever the connection between Vraxian drones and their hive mind. The effect would leave them confused and unable to coordinate. Some Council scientists objected, saying the weapon was too cruel. Amy looked at them with steel in her eyes. The Vraxians have destroyed 17 inhabited worlds. They have killed over 3 billion sentient beings. They are not going to stop unless we stop them. Sometimes mercy to the enemy means cruelty to innocent people who need our protection. The pulse generators were approved and built. When they were first deployed in battle, the results were dramatic. Vraxian formations that had seemed unstoppable suddenly fell apart as individual drones lost coordination. Council forces won battles they would have lost just weeks before. As the 3rd month of human involvement approached, the impossible was happening. The tide of the war was turning. Vraxian forces that had advanced steadily for 12 cycles were now retreating. Territory that had been lost was being reclaimed. The weight of command sat heavy on Ben's shoulders as he stood in the armory at 2 a.m. The memorial wall in front of him displayed the names of fallen soldiers, both human and alien. The list had grown longer over the past month. His unit had become famous throughout the Council forces. They took on the missions nobody else wanted, the impossible assaults and desperate defenses. They won almost every time. But winning came at a price. The assault on the Vraxian fortress world of Darkholm had been particularly brutal. The enemy had been dug in deep, with defenses that conventional attacks could not break. Ben's team had volunteered to go in first, to open a path for the main assault force. They had succeeded. The fortress fell, but Ben lost 12 soldiers that day, including Lieutenant Greg Foster, a 24-year-old officer from Colorado, who had always been first to volunteer for dangerous duty. Greg reminded Ben of his younger brother. The same easy smile and terrible jokes. Ben stared at Greg's name on the wall and wondered if he had made the right calls during the battle. Could he have done something differently? Could those 12 soldiers still be alive if he had been smarter, faster, better? Sergeant Kate Palmer found him there, standing alone in the dark. She was one of his most experienced soldiers, a veteran who had served with him since before they left Earth. She sat down on a bench nearby and did not speak for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. "You cannot save everyone, sir. You know that." Ben did not turn around. Knowing it and accepting it are different things. Kate nodded slowly. "I have been doing this for 15 years. Every commander I ever respected carried their dead with them. The bad commanders either did not care enough or cared too much. The good ones found a way to remember the fallen without being destroyed by guilt." "How?" Ben asked quietly. "By making sure their deaths meant something. By winning the war, they died fighting. By not wasting their sacrifice through hesitation or cowardice." Kate stood up and walked to stand beside him. "Greg knew the risks. We all do. He chose to be here. Honor that choice by finishing what we started." Ben looked at her and nodded. The next morning, he led his team back into combat, carrying the weight of the dead, but not breaking under it. While Ben dealt with the personal costs of war, Amy was making a breakthrough that could change everything. Her research team had been studying Vraxian communication patterns for weeks. What they discovered was remarkable. The Vraxian swarm was not truly a swarm at all. It was more like a single organism spread across thousands of ships and millions of drones. And like any organism, it had a brain. Somewhere in Vraxian-controlled space was a queen ship, a massive biovessel that coordinated all Vraxian forces. Amy presented her findings to the Council's top scientists. If they could locate and destroy the queen ship, the entire Vraxian military structure would collapse. Without central coordination, the drones would become confused and ineffective. The Council was skeptical at first. The idea seemed too simple, too good to be true. But the evidence was solid. Amy had tracked communication patterns, analyzed power signatures, and studied every piece of Vraxian biology they had captured. The Queen existed, and she was the key to ending the war. The problem was finding her. The Vraxians protected their queen carefully, keeping her location secret. But Amy's team kept searching, analyzing every battle, every communication intercept, every sensor reading. The answer came from an unlikely source. A Council intelligence officer named Varys had been monitoring Vraxian fleet movements for months. He noticed a pattern. No matter where Vraxian forces operated, they always maintained specific positions relative to one region of space, called the Omega Void. The Omega Void was a region of dark space considered too dangerous for navigation. Gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and sensor dead zones made it nearly impossible for Council ships to travel through. It was the perfect hiding place. Jake studied the data and reached the obvious conclusion. The Queen ship was hiding in the Omega Void, using the natural hazards as protection against attack. Admiral Crawford called a meeting of senior commanders to discuss options. The room was filled with both human and alien officers, all looking at the tactical display showing the Omega Void. "Getting there will be almost impossible for our ships," Commander Zephyx said. "Our navigation systems cannot handle the gravitational chaos. We would lose ships before ever reaching the target." Lisa spoke up from her position near the display. Human ships were designed to operate in the chaotic conditions of our outer solar system. Our navigation systems are built to handle extreme environments. We can make it through. General Thoraxis shook his massive head. "Even if you reach the Queen ship, it will be heavily defended. This would be a suicide mission." "Less. Unquam. Helen stood and addressed the room. "Every mission in this war carries risks. But this is our chance to end it. Not just win a few battles, but actually end the entire conflict. How many lives would that save? How many worlds?" The debate continued for hours. Some Council members argued that risking the human fleet was unacceptable. The Deathworlders had already given so much. Asking them to undertake a suicide mission seemed wrong. Jake listened to the arguments and finally stood up. "With respect, this is not the Council's decision to make. We are here as volunteers. We came to help end this war. If this mission can do that, then we will go. We did not come to the stars to be safe. We came to be useful." The room fell silent. Several alien commanders looked at Jake with expressions that might have been respect or might have been pity. It was hard to tell. The mission was authorized. 20 human warships would attempt to navigate the Omega Void and locate the Queen ship. Jake would command from the Valiant. Lisa would handle tactical coordination. Ben would lead the boarding team if they successfully reached their target. Amy would provide scientific support for locating and destroying the Queen. The fleet had 1 week to prepare. During that time, crews worked around the clock to outfit ships with extra shielding and enhanced sensors. Amy designed special equipment for detecting the Queen's bioelectric signature through the interference of the void. Ben trained his assault team for combat in the organic environments of Vraxian bioships. On the night before departure, Helen pulled Jake aside for a private conversation. They stood on an observation deck, looking out at the fleet, being prepared for what might be its final mission. "You do not have to do this," Helen said quietly. The council would understand if you declined. Jake shook his head. We made a promise when we answered their call. We said we would help end this war. This is how we keep that promise. Helen was quiet for a moment. If you do not come back, I will make sure Earth knows what you tried to do. I will make sure everyone understands the sacrifice you made. The Omega Void earned its reputation. Within the first 6 hours, the human fleet entered the region in tight formation. But the gravitational anomalies immediately began pulling ships off course. Navigation systems struggled to maintain heading, as space itself seemed to twist and fold around them. The ship Ranger was the first casualty. A sudden gravitational surge caught the vessel and crushed it like an empty can before anyone could react. 130 lives gone in an instant. Jake watched it happen on his sensors and felt sick, but he could not stop. They had to keep moving forward. 2 more ships were lost in the next day. The Victory succumbed to a radiation storm that overwhelmed its shields. The Guardian struck an object that sensors had not detected until it was too late. The fleet that had entered the void with 20 ships was down to 17. And they had not even found their target yet. Lisa worked around the clock in the tactical center, using data from the lost ships to chart safer routes for the others. Every loss taught them something about navigating this nightmare region of space. Every death brought knowledge that might save others. It was a terrible calculus, but it was the only way forward. Amy monitored her sensors constantly, searching for the bioelectric signature of the Queen ship. The interference made detection difficult, but she had designed her equipment specifically for these conditions. On the 3rd day, she finally detected something. I have got a signal, she announced to the bridge crew. It is faint, but it matches the profile. Bearing 345, Mark 18. Distance uncertain, but within 50,000 kilometers. Jake studied the tactical display. The signal was coming from the heart of the most dangerous part of the void, a region where 3 different gravitational wells created a chaotic mess that would tear apart any ship that entered carelessly. Plot a course, he ordered. Slow and careful. We did not come this far to lose ships to impatience. The remaining fleet moved forward like ships sailing through a storm. Sensors struggled to maintain a clear picture of their surroundings. Shields flared constantly as they deflected radiation and debris, but they kept moving. And then they saw it. The Vraxian Queen ship appeared on their sensors like a small moon. It was enormous beyond anything they had imagined. A biological construct that must have been grown over centuries. Its surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that made even experienced soldiers feel deeply uneasy. Something about those patterns triggered primal fears in mammalian brains. Surrounding the Queen were thousands of Vraxian drone ships, creating a defensive screen that would destroy any conventional attack. The drones moved in perfect coordination, their hive mind making them far more effective than any independent fleet. Jake called his senior officers to the bridge for final planning. Ben, Lisa, and Amy stood around the tactical display, looking at what they had to overcome. We cannot fight through all those drones, Lisa said flatly. Even if we commit every ship, the numbers are against us. We do not need to fight all of them, Jake replied. We just need to create an opening. Amy, how long does Ben need inside the Queen ship? Amy considered. Once he reaches the neural cluster, maybe 10 minutes to place charges and detonate them. But getting there could take an hour or more. The Queen is massive. Then we give him an hour, Jake said. He looked at Ben. Can you do this? Ben met his eyes steadily. Yes, sir. Get us to that ship, and my team will finish the job. The plan was desperate but simple. The human fleet would use their remaining kinetic munitions in a massive bombardment, creating a gap in the drone screen. In that brief opening, Ben's assault team would launch in armored pods and fight their way to the Queen's neural cluster. Once there, they would destroy it with Amy's specially designed explosives that combined traditional charges with electromagnetic disruptors. It was a suicide mission for Ben's team. Everyone knew it. But nobody suggested an alternative because there was not one. The assault team prepared in silence, 40 soldiers, 20 human and 20 alien volunteers, checked their weapons and equipment. They had trained together for months now, fought together, bled together. Species did not matter anymore. They were simply soldiers doing an impossible job. Private Danny Martinez was the youngest human on the team, barely 21 years old. He had lied about his age to join the military, then volunteered for the assault force, despite knowing the odds. Sergeant Kate Palmer had tried to talk him out of coming, but Danny was stubborn. "My parents told me I was too young for war," Danny said as he loaded his weapon. "Maybe they were right. But if we do not stop the Vraxians here, how many more kids will die? At least I get to do something that matters." Kate looked at him and saw herself 20 years ago, young and certain that she could change the world. "Stay close to me during the assault. Follow my lead, and you might survive this." Danny grinned. "Planning on it, Sergeant." The human fleet moved into attack position. Council observers watched the battle remotely from Outpost Sanctuary, transmitted via long-range relay. They sent messages begging the humans to wait for reinforcements. But Jake knew there was no time. Vraxian fleets were already moving to intercept them. It was now or never. "All ships, commence bombardment," Jake ordered. The human railguns opened fire in a coordinated sequence. Thousands of projectiles streaked through space, creating a wall of metal traveling at relativistic speeds. The Vraxian drones tried to respond, but their organic shields were not designed for this kind of attack. Drone after drone exploded. As the barrage continued, a gap opened in the defensive screen. It would not last long, maybe 2 minutes before the drones reorganized. "Launch assault pods," Ben commanded. 15 armored pods rocketed away from the fleet, carrying the assault team toward the Queen ship. Vraxian defensive fire lashed out, and 5 pods were destroyed before they reached the hull. 38 soldiers made it through. The pods crashed through the outer membrane of the Queen ship, and the assault team poured out into a nightmare. The interior was organic, living tissue that seemed to pulse and breathe. Vraxian warriors emerged from the walls themselves, attacking with claws and bioweapons. Ben led from the front, his rifle firing in controlled bursts. Kate was at his side, calling out targets and directing fire. Danny fought with the desperate courage of youth, covering angles that more experienced soldiers had missed. The alien volunteers proved their worth immediately. They understood Vraxian biology better than humans and could identify weak points in the warriors' armor. Working together, the mixed species team carved a path deeper into the Queen ship. Amy guided them remotely through the ship's structure, tracking the bioelectric signals to find the neural cluster. "You are close. 200 meters ahead, then down 1 level." They fought for every meter. Vraxian warriors poured in from side corridors. The assault team took casualties. A human corporal named Luis Santos was dragged into a wall by tendrils before anyone could save him. An alien soldier whose name translated to "Swift Water" died covering a hallway while others advanced. Outside, Jake fought a desperate holding action. More Vraxian ships were arriving every minute. The human fleet was down to 11 operational vessels and taking heavy damage. Shields were failing. Hulls were breached. But they held their position, buying time for Ben's team. Inside the Queen ship, the assault team finally reached the neural chamber. It was a vast, organic cathedral, and at its center was the Queen herself. She was massive, ancient, and terrifyingly intelligent. Through their translators, they heard her voice, cold and certain. "You are too late, Deathworlders. The hive has already seeded itself across the galaxy. Even my death will only slow us. You have accomplished nothing but your own destruction." Ben did not argue or hesitate. "Place the charges. Everyone else, defensive positions." The Queen's personal guards attacked. These were not simple warriors, but something far more dangerous, larger, and faster, and smarter. The fighting became savage and desperate. Jake watched his sensors as the Queen ship convulsed, its bioluminescent patterns flickering and dying. The massive biovessel that had coordinated Vraxian forces across the galaxy was dying, and with it, the hive mind that had made the swarm so dangerous. Across the battlefield, Vraxian drones simply stopped. Ships that had been attacking moments before now drifted aimlessly. The connection to their queen was severed, and without that guiding intelligence, they were lost and confused. All ships, search for escape pods, Jake ordered urgently. Ben's team needs extraction now. The remaining human vessels swept through the debris field, their sensors searching desperately. They found 3 pods. When the pods were brought aboard and opened, there were 14 survivors. 13 soldiers had made it to the pods and escaped the Queen ship before it exploded. Ben was not among them. Kate Palmer stumbled out of her pod, badly wounded but alive. Danny Martinez was right behind her, his armor scorched and dented but intact. When they asked about Ben, Kate's eyes filled with tears. He stayed behind to trigger the charges manually. He gave us time to escape. Her voice broke. He ordered me to leave him. I should have stayed. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. He made the choice a commander has to make. He saved your lives. Honor that by living. The battle was over. The Vraxian queen was dead, and without her coordination, the remaining Vraxian forces were easy to defeat. But the cost had been terrible. The human fleet had started with 20 ships and 4,000 personnel. Only 8 ships and 1,800 people returned. The war did not end immediately. Scattered Vraxian forces continued fighting for weeks, operating on instinct and whatever coordination individual groups could manage. But without the hive mind, they were manageable. Council forces that had been losing for 12 cycles now won battle after battle. Amy's predictions about Vraxian seeding proved partially accurate. The Queen had laid eggs on dozens of worlds, creating new potential hives. But without the coordination of a queen, these were just dangerous animals that could be contained and eliminated. Task forces were organized to hunt down every trace of Vraxian presence in the galaxy. 3 months after the battle in the Omega Void, the Galactic Council held a ceremony on their homeworld. It was attended by representatives from every council species, along with the survivors from the human fleet. The council unveiled a massive monument in their central plaza. It was made from a composite of materials from every council member world, shaped into a pillar that reached toward the sky. On its surface were carved the names of every soldier who had died in the war, human and alien together. Ben Carter's name was prominently displayed, along with all the others who had given their lives in the final assault. Below the names was a simple inscription in every council language and in English. They answered the call. The stars, remember. Admiral Helen Crawford accepted the council's highest honor on behalf of humanity. She stood before thousands of assembled beings and gave a speech that would be studied for generations. We came from a world that tried to kill us every day, she said. A death world that forged us in fire and pain. For a long time, we thought that made us cursed. But when we heard your call for help, we realized it had prepared us for something important, not to conquer or destroy, but to protect those who could not protect themselves. She paused, looking out at the crowd. The soldiers we lost knew the risks. They knew they might not come home, but they also knew that their sacrifice could save billions of lives across the galaxy. That knowledge gave their deaths meaning. Honor them not by mourning, but by building the peace they died to create. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Others joined in, and soon, the entire plaza echoed with the sound of applause from dozens of different species, each showing appreciation in their own way. Jake Morrison, newly promoted to Admiral, stood beside Helen. He thought about the day they had received that first transmission, asking for help from aliens they had never met. He thought about the journey through space, the battles fought, the friends lost. He thought about Ben making that final sacrifice so others could live. Lisa Hayes had been promoted to general and given a position as advisor to the Council Military Command. She was helping to reform their entire approach to warfare, teaching them to balance aggression with discipline, to be willing to take risks but not to throw lives away carelessly. It was delicate work, but she was good at it. Amy Chen continued her research, but now she worked alongside the best scientists from dozens of species. Together, they were exploring peaceful applications of the technologies developed during the war. The electromagnetic disruptors that had disrupted the Vraxian hive mind were being adapted for medical uses. The navigation systems that had survived the Omega Void were opening up new regions of space for exploration. Kate Palmer took over command of the 1st Combined Combat Force, the unit Ben had built. She trained them hard, pushing them to be better while never forgetting why they fought. Danny Martinez became one of her best squad leaders, the young soldier who had survived the impossible mission now teaching others how to do the same. The Council offered humanity full membership, a voice in galactic affairs, and access to countless worlds for colonization and exploration. The debate on Earth was intense. Some wanted to accept immediately, others worried about losing human independence. But eventually, the decision was made. Humanity would join the galactic community. The first alien ambassadors arrived on Earth 6 months after the war ended. They walked through human cities and met human families. They learned about Earth's terrible beauty, about the world that had shaped humanity into what they were. Many of the aliens found Earth frightening, with its aggressive weather and dangerous wildlife. But they also began to understand. On Outpost Sanctuary, which had become a permanent home for many of the human veterans, a group gathered on the anniversary of the final battle. Jake was there, along with Kate, Danny, Lisa, and Amy. Helen had made the trip from Earth specifically for the occasion. They stood before a memorial wall that displayed images of the fallen. Ben's picture was in the center, smiling that easy smile he had always worn. Around him were the faces of hundreds of others who had not come home. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Danny asked quietly. He was older now, no longer the kid who had lied about his age to join up. The war had aged all of them. "We did what needed to be done," Kate replied. "We gave the galaxy a chance to survive. That is all anyone can do." Jake nodded. "Ben once told me that the only thing worse than fighting was letting innocent people die because you were too scared to fight." I think he was right. They stood in silence for a while, remembering. Then Helen spoke. "The Council wants humanity to help explore new regions of space. There are dozens of uncharted sectors out there. They think Deathworlders are best suited for the dangerous work of first contact with unknown species." Lisa laughed softly. "Of course they do. Send the crazy humans into the unknown and see what happens. Also, well, will you go?" He thought about it. Part of him wanted to go home to Earth, to rest after years of war. But another part, the part that had made him volunteer for this mission in the first place, wanted to keep moving forward. There was so much galaxy out there to explore. "Someone has to make sure humans do not accidentally start another war," he said with a slight smile. "Might as well be us." Over the following years, humanity spread across the stars. Human colonies appeared on dozens of worlds. Human ships explored regions of space that the Council had never reached. Human soldiers trained alongside alien warriors, sharing the lessons learned from the Vraxian War. But humans also learned from the Council species. They learned about cultures thousands of years older than their own. They learned about art and philosophy from beings who thought in ways completely different from human patterns. They learned that strength was important, but so was wisdom. The galaxy was changing. The war had forced different species to work together in ways they never had before. The old divisions and prejudices were slow to fade, but they were fading. Humans were no longer seen as scary Deathworlders, but as allies who had proven themselves when it mattered most. On Earth, in the city of New York, a new building was constructed. It was the headquarters for Earth's Diplomatic Corps, the organization that would represent humanity in the Galactic Council. In the lobby was a statue of Ben Carter, frozen in bronze, giving orders to his team. Below, it was a plaque with his final words to Kate. "Get them out of here. That is an order." Children visiting the building would ask their parents who the statue was. The parents would tell them about the war, about the desperate call that brought humans to the stars, about the soldiers who gave everything to end a conflict that threatened the entire galaxy. And those children would grow up knowing that humanity had a place among the stars, earned through sacrifice and courage. They would know that when the galaxy called for help, Earth had answered. They would understand that being from a death world was not a curse but a responsibility, to use their strength to protect those who needed protection. The Vraxian War became history, studied by military students and historians. But for those who had fought it, the war would never truly be over. They carried it with them, in the memories of friends lost and battles won, in the scars both visible and hidden. Jake stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Explorer, leading a mission into uncharted space. His crew was mixed. Humans and aliens, working side by side. They were heading toward a region where sensors had detected signs of intelligent life, making first contact with a species that did not yet know the galaxy was populated with other civilizations. As the ship jumped to faster than light speed, Jake thought about that first transmission, so long ago. The desperate plea from Ambassador Kalara. The decision to answer the call. Everything that had happened since. The Deathworlders had been summoned to end a war. They had done that, at terrible cost. But more importantly, they had proven that humanity belonged among the stars, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as protectors and explorers, as people willing to risk everything for strangers they had never met. The call had been answered. The war had been won. And now, the real work of building a peaceful galaxy together had begun. It would take generations, maybe centuries. There would be setbacks and struggles. But for the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were truly working together, united by the memory of those who had given everything to make that unity possible. In the quiet of space, traveling faster than light toward the unknown, Jake smiled. Ben would have liked seeing how things turned out. They all would have. 10 soldiers fell in the first 30 seconds. Kate was hit by bioacid that ate through her armor, badly wounded but still fighting. Danny took position beside her, his weapon firing until it ran dry, then switching to his sidearm, then finally to his combat knife when that too was empty. The charges were placed, but the remote detonator was destroyed in the fighting. Someone would have to trigger them manually, which meant staying behind while others escaped. Ben made the call without thinking. He activated the manual trigger and ordered everyone else to fall back to the pods. Kate tried to argue, but he pulled rank and physically pushed her toward the exit. "Get them out of here, Sergeant." "That is an order." Ben watched his team retreat, firing to cover their escape. Then he turned back to the Queen and smiled grimly. If this was where it ended, at least it was for something that mattered. He pressed the detonator. The explosion tore through the neural chamber. "If we do not come back, it probably means we failed," Jake said. "And if we failed, the war continues. Make sure whoever comes after us learns from our mistakes." They stood in silence for a while. 2 soldiers who understood that some things were worth dying for. Then Helen saluted, and Jake returned it. No more words were needed. The next morning, the human fleet departed Outpost Sanctuary. The entire station came out to watch them leave. Thousands of council personnel, from dozens of different species, stood at observation windows and saluted as the 20 human warships engaged their drives and headed toward the Omega Void. Jake stood on the bridge of the Valiant and watched the station disappear behind them. Somewhere ahead, through the most dangerous region of space in the galaxy, was the Queen ship. Somewhere ahead was the key to ending a war that had killed billions. The Deathworlders were going hunting one last time, but success came with costs. Human tactics meant higher casualty rates in individual battles, even though they were winning those battles. Some council forces, inspired by human aggression, began taking risks that even the humans thought were excessive. Jake witnessed this during a liberation operation. A council task force, eager to prove themselves, pursued fleeing Vraxian ships into a civilian shipping lane and destroyed them without proper identification protocols. There were no casualties that time. But the disregard for procedure troubled Jake deeply. Helen called a meeting of all senior commanders, human and alien alike. She reminded everyone that winning was important, but so was remaining the people you wanted to be after victory. The council forces needed discipline and aggression in balance, not just mindless violence. The humans had shown the council how to fight. Now they needed to teach them how to win without losing themselves in the process. The war was far from over, but for the first time, victory seemed possible. The Deathworlders had changed everything, and there was no going back to the old ways. Row human casualties. The mission was a complete success. That night, in the officers' quarters on Outpost Sanctuary, Amy sat with several council scientists. They asked her the question that everyone was wondering. How were humans so good at violence? How did they fight so easily, so naturally? Amy considered her answer carefully. She told them about Earth, about a world where almost everything tried to kill you from the moment you were born. She explained about predators and prey, about weather that could freeze or burn you in minutes, about diseases and natural disasters. She told them that every human alive was descended from survivors, that warfare was part of human culture, that they had nearly destroyed themselves many times, but always chose to continue. The council scientists listened in silence. For the first time, they began to understand what they had summoned. The Deathworlders were not just willing to fight, they were built for it, shaped by their terrible world into the perfect warriors. And now, those warriors were here to save them. As the fleet prepared to jump to the coordinates provided by the Council, Jake stood on the bridge of the Valiant and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a war was being fought. Somewhere out there, aliens were dying by the billions, and now humanity was being called to help. He thought about Earth, about the dangerous world that had shaped humanity into what they were. He thought about the wars humans had fought, the struggles they had overcome, the countless times they had faced extinction and somehow survived. Maybe that was what the galaxy needed. Maybe Deathworlders were exactly what this war required. "All ships report ready, sir," Sam said from his station. Jake nodded and gave the order. "Take us out. Let's go meet our new friends and see what we can do about their war." The Valiant and its sister ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared from Earth's solar system, heading toward a conflict that would change the fate of the galaxy forever.